hiding in plain sight. I never paid much attention to that phrase before I started my new job. Wanted nighttime security guard. That's all the ad said, along with the phone number. The town I live in, Willow Creek, isn't very big. Barely a dot on the map on the way to somewhere else. But for whatever reason, we have a museum. I have no idea how it's still in business. I can't recall ever seeing a single person walk through its doors. But when I called the number, the man who answered told me to come to this address that evening for my interview. He seemed a little overexcited that I had answered the ad. When I asked him about the job, he said, "Oh, the usual thing for a security guard. I've read some pretty unusual things about security guards on forums, but I'm sure those stories are made up." Walking up the wide stone steps, built to accommodate crowds of people, was a little intimidating and creepy, with nobody for company besides the glowing lamps mounted on the sides of the railings. The whole thing gave off a very dystopian ghost town zombie apocalypse vibe. I guess the stone gargoyles staring down at me didn't help much. I gazed into their eyes, half expecting them to jump down and carry me off to be a sad sacrifice to some ancient deity. If I hadn't already discussed my hourly wage, I would have turned and hightailed it back home. But the wage was more than acceptable for a security guard. It was downright generous. I wondered why he would pay so much, but walking up those desolate stairs gave me a clue. Nobody wanted to go near the place. The word haunted had been mentioned more than once. Looking up at the front of the building, the sporadic lights made shadows fall all around and gave it an intimidating presence. I paused at the top of the stairs, thinking about every horror movie I've ever seen. There's always that one moment where the characters could turn back and live another day, but they never do. The wind whipped up, blowing against me, threatening to push me back down the stairs, almost as if warning me not to go inside. For a moment I considered heeding the warning and climbing back down, knowing that my rent and car payment were due. That made me reevaluate that decision. I stepped up and opened the door. Fully expecting the door to creak on its hinges, I was pleasantly surprised when it opened silently and with little effort, despite feeling quite heavy. The ornate decorations and beautiful decor took my breath away. I wasn't sure what I expected, but I found myself regretting that this was the first time I had ever visited this museum. I hadn't made it 2 steps until an elegantly dressed man appeared and smiled at me. He didn't so much walk up to me as glide, showing an air of dignity bordering on royalty. "Mr. Welton, I presume," he said, wearing a warm smile. Yes, sir," I said, offering my hand. He glanced at it with an amused look. "Right then. Follow me and I'll show you your duties," he said, turning on his heels and gliding away. I pretended to smooth my hair as I followed, feeling like an idiot for offering my hand. He glided past several works of art toward a small desk. "Right then. You'll be in charge of checking the doors so nothing gets in or out." "You mean stolen?" I said. "Yes," he said slowly. "Stolen. So you've got the job already." He stared at me blankly. "Did you show up?" I nodded. "Well, then you've got the job. Do I need a uniform or anything?" "Let's see how your first night goes," he said. "There's a set of rules on the paper on your desk. Please adhere to them. You must do at least 1 round per night through every room and check every door." 1 round. That's it. This place is rather large and, challenging. I looked around with a hint of hesitation. Maybe there was a reason they paid so much. He smiled. "If you have any problems, just call the number on the paper." That's it. Well, I believe so. I'll lock the door on my way out and unlock it again at 9 on my way back in. I stepped over to the desk and began reading the paper. "What does this mean?" I said, turning around, but he was gone. "Hello," I called, but only my voice echoed back to me. I looked at the puzzling paper again and read the rules. Rule number 1, there are no rules. Rule number 2, there are no rules. What is this fight club? I said to myself. Every time you break a rule, return to rule number 1. Wait a minute. How can I break a rule when there are no rules? Rule number 3, how you follow the rules is as important as why you follow the rules. That made no sense at all. Rule number 4, if you are caught breaking the rules, the penalties may be severe. Okay, there's something wrong here. This is just talking in circles. I read back over the rules and they looked strange. More than just the strangeness of the rules, or non-rules themselves, it was the way they were written. I went back and looked at each letter, then paid attention to the letters that were capitalized. It looked like some hidden messaging. They're watching. I hesitated. Who's watching? I decided to keep reading in hopes that this would begin to make some sense. Rule number 5, do not, under any circumstances, make noise. Every time you do a round, a message received, don't move. I stood there immobile, wondering how long I was meant to play this game, and if somebody would come by and tag me to unfreeze me and allow me to start my round. As I waited, chuckling to myself at the ludicrousness of this insane game of freeze tag, I felt the air grow cold. Clouds chugged out of my mouth like an old steam train as I fought the urge to rub my arms. A chill that had little to do with the sudden temperature drop ran down my spine as I felt a presence in the room. It crept up behind me, silent as the grave. I could feel its hot breath wash over me as it snapped. Instead of enjoying the sudden warmth, my temperature plummeted. My heart hammered in my chest. It was all I could do to keep from running away in sheer terror. As it passed by, I was overwhelmed by the stench of death. This thing was every nightmare I'd ever had, personified. I refused to open my eyes and see its hideous form for fear of passing out. Instead, I focused on imitating a statue, which was nearly impossible with my freezing body aching to shiver in frozen dread. The nameless terror passed to the far side of the room, taking some of the cold with it. Then, as suddenly as it came, it was gone. The room returned to a normal temperature, but I waited a few moments before moving, just to be sure. Once I felt it was safe, I nearly collapsed to the floor in relief. After giving myself a moment to recover, I glanced at the paper with newfound fear. Was this a harbinger of doom or a warning label meant to keep me safe? Unsure if I wanted to read the rest, I took a moment to reevaluate my current career choice. Could I just walk out and say I quit? After a brief internal debate, I decided it wasn't worth the money if I was about to be dragged through a portal to the underworld. Just a short time ago, I would have considered that thought laughably ludicrous, but it was seeming more plausible by the moment. I started toward the exit door, with every intention of calling and telling my boss I wouldn't be finishing the shift. Unfortunately, the door had other plans. When I pushed on the crash bar, nothing happened. I tried turning the deadbolt, but it refused to move. After a few minutes of futility, I gave up, frustrated, and determined to just sit in this room until morning came around. Sitting at the desk, I spun around in the chair, waiting for the next 9 hours and 13 minutes to pass quickly. 5 minutes later, out of sheer boredom, I glanced at the paper. Rule number 6, you can't just sit at the desk and wait for the door to open upon the ending of your shift. Suck it up. Are you serious? I said in frustration. Somebody thinks they're funny, huh? Glancing back at the paper, below Rule 6 were 3 letters. Yes. I backed away and got up to do my round, if nothing else to get away from this all-seeing sheet of paper that I had grown afraid to look at. Hesitating, I reached for the door to the room where the nightmare had disappeared. Glancing up, I saw a slip of paper taped to the door. It said, "The only way out is through." Sighing heavily, my trembling hand turned the knob and slowly opened the door. As I closed it, on the other side was another slip of paper. This one said, "Avoid eye contact and you'll be fine." Confused by the cryptic statement, I turned and realized what it meant. The room was full of stuffed creatures of many shapes and sizes. Most of them seemed to be mythical in nature, of the cryptid variety. There was a Bigfoot, a skinwalker, a dogman, a Jersey devil, a Wendigo, and many others. As my eyes scanned the room, I noticed movement. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The skinwalker turned its head just slightly to look right at me. I quickly darted my eyes away in fear and disbelief. When the dogman turned its head to stare at me, panic coursed through my veins. I turned to go back through the door, remembering what the pieces of paper on both sides of the door said. The only way out is through, and avoid eye contact and you'll be fine. I felt the last statement was akin to saying, if you hold on tight enough on a roller coaster, you won't need the safety harness. Aiming my eyes at the floor, I turned and started toward the far side of the room. I hoped that all they would do was watch, but that hope was dashed. I heard growls and footsteps from all around the room. Hesitating, I wondered if I would need a clean pair of pants by the time I reached the far side. That is, if I survived. The sounds of footsteps grew louder behind me, when suddenly there was a pair of hairy legs blocking my path. I stopped as a low growl made the air vibrate. Oh dear God, I whispered, knowing that my life was about to end horribly and painfully. Fighting the urge to look up, I sidestepped and went around the legs, hoping to pass unnoticed. I counted my footsteps, hoping each one wouldn't be my last. Silently praying, I continued toward the door with my eyes aimed down, watching nothing more than my feet. It seemed like the longest walk of my life, listening to the mythical creatures behind me come to life and sounding every bit like they were following me, just waiting for the right moment to grab me and turn me into a late-night snack. It came as a surprise when I bumped my head into the far wall, shocked not only that I had made it but that I had missed the door. I glanced over and found my glorious escape route. As I opened the door, I accidentally glanced back into the room and made eye contact with the Wendigo. Its roar of rage is something I'll never forget. It charged at me with blinding speed, claws unsheathed, fangs ready to tear me to shreds. I dove through the door in the nick of time, slamming it behind me. The impact on the other side of the wall made dust settle to the floor, causing me to sneeze. I stood and saw another piece of paper taped to the door. "Whatever you do, don't make a sound," it said. As I was about to make a comment about it being too late, a giant set of fangs flew at me from the semi-darkness. Attached to them was the biggest snake I had ever seen or heard of. It shook off the impact with the door as my legs took over and sprinted for the far side of the room. The dim lighting made it impossible to see the far doors well, with rocks and other obstacles littering the floor. As I made my desperate dash to safety, I swear the rock that tripped me moved into my path on its own. Instead of a death sentence, it had saved my life, as the snake flew over my prone body. Had I not tripped, its massive fangs would have gone straight through me. Not waiting around to celebrate my accidental good fortune, I jumped up and raced toward the door again. It was now within sight, but so was the snake. It had recovered and was coiling for another strike. Running around a large boulder to make myself a harder target, I aimed for a spot 5 feet from the door. When I was almost there, I dove just as the snake passed over me, slamming into the wall. I jumped up and opened the door, closing it behind me. I took a moment to catch my breath and think about asking a lot more questions when I interviewed for my next job. I tried to open my eyes but realized they were already open. The room was engulfed in total darkness. Pulling out my flashlight, I shone it around but couldn't see anything aside from the door and the floor in front of me. There was no sign of anything in the room, not even a ceiling. It was as if the darkness had sucked the light into itself, never to escape. Being robbed of sight, I relied on hearing. Taking a long listen, I waited to hear any growls or slithers, anything to give me a hint of what I might have to deal with. But there was nothing, only soul-crushing silence. Having scanned the room the best I could, I set out to find the far door. Nothing seemed strange, even the echo sounded like a normal large room. It was just devoid of light. The normalness of it terrified me. All I could find out of place was a slight scent of disinfectant. I wasn't sure if that was because whatever horrible creature called this room home had killed people here, and they wanted to cover the smell, or if the creature itself had passed away, leaving some poor janitor to clean up the mess. In either case, I was on full alert. They say that when one of your senses falters, the others become more acute to make up for it. The same thing was happening with my paranoia. I imagined the shadows moving around in the total pitch of darkness. My steps were small and slow as my arms waved in front of me, acting as my eyes, searching for any obstacles. It took what seemed like an eternity to get to the far side, walking so slowly. I guess that's the price of being careful. As I approached the wall, the flashlight's vision became useful once again. I must have gotten off track as I walked because the door was far off to the side. I had to walk a good 50 feet along the wall to find it. When I opened the door, I was greeted by a horrible sight. The snake was coiled up in front of it, and I quickly shut the door as it prepared to strike. Why would they have 2 snake rooms? But then, why? Wasn't much of a relevant question in this place. My mind came up with a terrible answer. It wasn't a second snake, it was the same one. I must have gotten turned around in the darkness and done a circle. As my brain tried to grapple with denial, I tried to figure out a way to get across this room without unintentionally doubling back, keeping in mind that even though I had yet to see or hear anything in this room didn't mean it wasn't there. Searching for any ideas, I looked down at my flashlight, squared my shoulders against the wall to regain my bearings, and tossed the flashlight straight in front of me. It landed with a loud clatter and then rolled around in a playful circle before coming to rest. If there was anything in the room, most likely I had just woken it up and shown it exactly where I was. I stood still and listened. After a few minutes, I didn't hear any movement. It seemed safe to walk to my flashlight, pick it up, and toss it another 15 feet, hopefully in a straight line. I did this the whole way across the room, still listening for sounds but becoming more confident with each step that I wouldn't hear any. The door was just a few feet to the side of where I had aimed. Somehow, I had gone in a straight line. Grabbing the door knob, I slowly turned it so as not to alert the snake if by some trick I ended up back in that room. But there was no trick and no snake. The door opened to blinding light. I covered my eyes to give them time to adjust. Once they had acclimated, I looked around at a beautiful room full of clouds. There were even clouds on the floor. It was disconcerting at first and almost made me lose my balance because it was so well painted that it literally looked like I was walking on clouds. I took a tentative step into the room, making sure it was an illusion and I wasn't about to fall thousands of feet to my death. Holding my breath, I stepped onto the first cloud and let go of the door frame. It was firm like a floor should be. My second and third steps were more confident as I realized how effective the illusion was. Once I was acclimated, walking in the clouds was fun. This was turning out to be the easiest room I had been in so far. That's when I heard the scream. It was deafening and seemed to come from everywhere at once. I dove to the floor, only to realize there was nowhere to hide from whatever it was. I stood out like a sore thumb against the blue sky and white fluffy clouds painted on every surface of the room. The scream sounded again, and I began to run, having no idea which way I was going or where the screaming was coming from. For all I knew, I was running toward whatever it was. I just knew it didn't sound human, and I had no desire to find out what it was. Soon, the choice was taken out of my hands. I saw a dark spot appear against the clouds that quickly became larger. It was almost on me when I dove to the floor, feeling something sharp break my back. Pain shot through me as I reached around and found the back of my shirt in shreds. Not only that, but my hand was covered in blood. Whatever it was had sliced my back open, and I was bleeding. Adrenaline kicked in, and I ran faster than I ever have. The problem was I didn't know where I was running to or what I was running from. I was just running. I heard wings flapping, and I looked back just in time to see the largest bird of prey I'd ever seen. It looked like a golden eagle, only the thing was massive. The wingspan was easily 20 feet. As I was running, I turned to get a closer look at this thing while trying to get away from it. My feet got tangled up, and I fell backward just as the razor-sharp talons passed over, mere inches from my face. I jumped up and started running again. As I glanced back to find my attacker, I was met with the strangest sight. There was a smear of blood on the floor where I had just been lying. It looked like somebody had wiped blood on a cloud. The wings flapped again, and I knew it was close. I had run out of luck. It would be ready for anything this time. Its razor-sharp talons would rip me to pieces, and there was no doubt about it. There was only one option. I jumped and whipped around in midair, throwing my flashlight as hard as I could. It connected with its head, which was mere feet away. It screamed and dove off to the side, impacting the floor so hard that I felt the vibration and landed in a heap. I didn't stop to check on it. The door loomed ahead of me, and I pushed myself for every ounce of speed my body could muster. Turning the knob and opening the door in one smooth motion, I dove through and slammed it shut. Lying on the floor, breathing hard, trying to catch my breath, I knew I was a sitting duck for whatever monster lurked in this room. I rolled over to get into some defensive position for whatever was about to attack when I saw that I was back in the main hall. I had somehow survived my first, and, as far as I was concerned, last round. I stumbled my way to the restroom, wondering in the back of my mind what kind of insanity I would find in there. Would I have to crawl through the mirror into another dimension to get a roll of toilet paper? Fortunately, the restroom held no surprises. I took off my destroyed shirt and ran water over it to clean up my back as best I could. When I was done, I put some paper towels on the wounds and put my jacket on top of it. The desk and chair were where I spent the rest of the night. Surprisingly, it had taken me almost an hour to complete the round. As I sat there pondering if I could survive another night at this job, I saw a dark spot form on the wall and detach itself, only to float over toward me. I closed my eyes and sat perfectly still, ignoring the sudden drop in temperature. The stench of death surrounded me, but I refused to move. For a moment, I thought I heard a sound like sniffing, and then it seemed to diminish. Once the temperature rose again, I opened my eyes, and the apparition was gone. As bored as I was for the next few hours, I wasn't tempted to do another round. Not even in the slightest. When 9 o'clock rolled around, the boss appeared and glided over to me, wearing a little grin. "I see you managed to make it through." "Congratulations, you're the first one in some time." "The first one to make it through a single round," I nodded. "How many others have there been?" I said with a haunted look in my eyes. He shook his head. "Oh, let's not worry about that, shall we? Here's the amount we agreed upon." He handed me a stack of bills, and I gladly took them. "Would you be interested in staying on and being my permanent nighttime guard?" I looked at the money. "As much as I'd like to. I don't see how this job could be called permanent when the mortal danger is so real." "Oh, it is a challenge, I'll admit. However, you rose to it last night. I'm prepared to offer you twice the amount I gave you if you agree to stay on." I stared at the fistful of money and imagined not having to struggle with bills or any other expenses. Then I turned a little, and my back painfully reminded me of the dangers. "I'll have to think about it," I said. "While you're thinking, consider this: you have yet to see the basement." "Basement?" I nodded. "It's considerably more challenging." "I'll let you know." "Very well. You can see yourself out. I recommend getting that back attended to." And with that, he vanished into thin air right in front of my eyes. I looked at the money, wondering if it would vanish as well. Fortunately, it remained firmly in my grasp. As I walked toward the front door, for some reason, I felt hesitant to open it and leave. It was as if some force was exerting itself against me, like the museum didn't want me to go. It wasn't a pleasant feeling, more like a dog losing its favorite toy. I pushed the doors open and laughed. This whole ordeal made me ponder my concepts of reality, as well as being terrified of the day when the things in the building would escape. The big question was, did I need the money that badly? Was I willing to put myself in mortal peril just for a few measly dollars? I turned and looked back at the museum. In the daylight, it looked innocent. None of the terrors that lay within showed on the outside. As I turned to head home, I swear I saw a fleeting glimpse of the apparition. It seemed to be following me. I looked again and it was gone. That must have been my imagination. I'm an idiot, I thought, as I walked down the dark street, carrying a backpack full of stuff I wasn't even sure I needed. But who knew what I'd need when I was going back to a haunted museum to sacrifice myself? Guard the place for the night. I went home and did a lot of soul searching about staying on as the night watchman. Translation: I watched some movies about museums and then fell asleep listening to a story about a park ranger who turned into a cryptid hunter. After paying my bills, I had money left over, so I went shopping for some things that might help me live through the night. Do my guard job a little better. Yeah, that's it. Unfortunately, I didn't have a magical store like that cryptid hunter did. When I asked the lady at my local Dollar General if they carried tranquilizer guns, she looked at me like I had grown a third head. I decided to improvise. I bought a Nerf gun, several bottles of hot sauce, extra spicy, and then got a few more flashlights plus batteries and duct tape, because you can always use that. I grabbed a few more things that caught my eye: the biggest backpack they had, a heavy jacket, some extra clothes, and a lot of bandages, because my back wasn't healed yet and I wanted to be safe rather than sorry. As I walked down the street in my heavy-duty clothes with a thick jacket and a full backpack strapped to my back, more than one car slowed down as people stared at me. Unfortunately, one of those cars happened to belong to the local sheriff. "Evening," he said as he pulled up beside me and matched my pace. "Evening, sir," I said, feeling the same feeling everybody does when a cop pulls up behind them. What did I do? What have I ever done in my entire life? He knows everything, and he's coming to take me to jail for that thing I did a long time ago. "You feeling a little cold tonight?" he said, looking at my jacket. "I'm just heading to work," I said, starting to sweat. "Where do you work?" "At the museum," I said, pointing toward the lights that had just appeared on the horizon. He stopped the car, got out, and walked up in front of me. It was a bit intimidating since he had a few inches and a good 50 pounds on me. As he walked up, I saw all the stuff on his belt and was half tempted to ask if I could borrow his taser for the night. He saw me eyeing his belt and stood a few feet back. I guess he thought I was going to try to make a move. "When did you start working there?" he said. "Last night." He looked me up and down. "You seem to be remarkably in one piece." "My back hurts a bit." He nodded with what I could almost call respect, maybe a little awe. "So you know a little bit about the place, then?" I said, lowering my voice and looking around to see if anybody else was listening. He responded by rolling up a sleeve. There was a nasty scar on the back of his forearm that looked like something had bitten a chunk off it, but the bite was huge, much larger than any human mouth. "Wow," I said. "Did you get that at?" He nodded. "In the basement," he said. "I quit after the second night and a week in the hospital." I swallowed hard. "A week." He nodded as he took a step closer and reached into his belt. I thought he was getting cuffs to arrest me for something when he pulled out a can of pepper spray and handed it to me. I looked at it for a long moment. "Go ahead, take it. You'll need it," he said. I took the can and stashed it in my backpack. "Thanks." He nodded and then walked back around and got in his car. "Tell the curator that Sheriff Tanner sends his regards," he said as he got in. I stepped over and leaned in the window. "Any advice for dealing with the basement?" He thought for a long moment. "When you get stuck, just remember up is down." "Okay," I said, hoping for something a little less cryptic. "And if you do make it through the night in one piece, come see me at the station. Anybody who can make it 2 nights in that place, I'd consider hiring as a deputy." I nodded and he nodded back, then drove away. In a way, it was nice to know that somebody else had done this job and made it out alive. Of course, that someone being the sheriff was a nice bonus. At least I knew I wasn't crazy. The rest of the walk, I had a little bounce in my step instead of trudging to my doom. I started thinking, I can do this. When I stood at the bottom of the steps once more, it didn't seem nearly as scary as last night. I nodded to the gargoyles for some odd reason, then climbed the stairs and opened the door. I was a few minutes early, so I went over and set my backpack beside the desk and went to the bathroom. When I came back out, the curator was standing near the desk smiling. "I am so glad you chose to return," he said, and looking somewhat more prepared. "I hope so," I said. "Well, you have to do a round upstairs and in the basement." "No, I believe the basement will take up much of your time this evening." As relieved as I was not to have to do both, his statement worried me a bit. "Oh, I almost forgot. Sheriff Tanner sends his regards," I said. His smile grew broader. "Ah, so you've spoken to the sheriff?" "Only in passing. He wanted to know what I was doing with the backpack." He glanced down at the pack with what I would almost call an amused look. "Well, I'm sure he was professionally curious. If you see the sheriff again, tell him he's more than welcome to return for a visit during daytime hours, of course." "I'll let him know." "Well then, I'll let you get to it. Unless you have any questions?" "Only one," I said. "What would happen if I had talked to the apparition in this room?" His smile faltered. "I wouldn't. Not even I talked to him." He nodded and glided away, leaving me alone. But I wondered if I was ever really alone here. With so much supernatural happening in this place, I wondered how many entities watched, invisible to the human eye. I shook off the thought and focused on getting ready. There was another piece of paper on the desk, but it was blank. "What? No stupid rules tonight?" I said. "My rules aren't stupid," appeared on the paper. "Really? There are no rules. There are no rules." "Oh, that was to give you the hidden message," appeared on the paper. I couldn't come right out and say it. "Where's the challenge in that?" Maybe I should challenge you with a paper shredder." "That's it. No rules for you tonight. No help, no hints, nothing." I paused to reflect on the fact that I was having an argument with a piece of paper. Unfortunately, it wasn't the strangest thing I had done in the last 24 hours. As I glanced down at the paper, I felt the room grow cold instantly. I froze in place and looked to the floor. The apparition came right up to me, and I could feel the warmth, the stench of death. I refused to move. However, I did keep my eyes open. I saw a pair of human-looking feet, but they were rotting, decaying flesh barely held onto the bones as they hovered right in front of me. Even though I knew what to do, my mind was telling me to run, to get away from this thing at all costs. My reaction was to stay as still as possible. It sniffed me and then turned and drifted away. Once the temperature in the room went back to normal, I looked up and it was gone. Wiping the sweat off my forehead, I glanced back at the paper. "See, you wouldn't have known to do that if it wasn't for me." "You're right," I said. "I apologize. Would you please help me this evening?" There was a long pause before a single word appeared. "No." I reached into my pocket and pulled out a disposable lighter. "What do you think you're doing?" I flipped the wheel and the flame sprang to life. "This isn't funny." I held the paper a few inches above the flame and waited. "You think you can threaten me?" I lowered the paper a little closer to the flame. "How about you burn first?" I said, lowering the paper a little closer so that the smoke from the flame licked it hungrily. All right, I'll do it." I released the button and the flame disappeared. A map appeared on the paper, at least a partial map. It showed the way to a stairwell, and at the bottom, a corridor, and then it faded to nothing. What good is this thing if I can't see what's down there? Guess you'll have to find out yourself. I relit the lighter. I'm sorry. I'm not allowed to show any more. All right then, how about some of the rules? Rule number 1, don't get killed. Yeah, very funny. I'll give you a little more. A red dot showed up on the map in the far corner of it, off to the left, but no rooms were visible, so I had no idea where it actually was. What is that? You'll want to stay away from that. Why? But no more words came, no more bits or pieces of the map. Fine, I said, tossing the paper on the desk, taking a picture of it with my phone, and then picking up my pack. I'll make it without you. I started off toward the stairs. They were not well lit. My heart raced as I got to the end of the hallway, and there were 3 doors staring back at me. I looked at the picture of the map that showed the right door was the one to the stairwell. It didn't show what was behind the other doors. Even though my curiosity was piqued, I didn't dare open a door I wasn't supposed to. Making it through the night would be hard enough without adding extra complications. I opened the stairwell door and stared into total darkness. I had learned my lesson from last night. Reaching into my pack, I pulled out a light on a headband, turned it on, and grabbed one of the regular flashlights and ignited it. The stairway was made of wood that creaked with every step I took. Did I really expect any less? I said to no one. I made sure to check each turn to ensure nothing was waiting to jump out at me. 3 turns later, I arrived at the bottom. The floor looked old but nondescript. It could have been concrete, but it was so dusty I couldn't tell for sure. In front of me stretched a hallway with stone walls on each side. There were no doors, no windows, no decorations of any kind. As ornate as the main hall was, this was the opposite. Nothing special about it. Slowly, I made my way to the end, checking behind me as I went. When I reached the end of the hall, there was a T-junction. I could turn left or right. Peeking around the corner and looking each way, they both seemed identical. Glancing at the map on my phone, I saw the red dot way off in the corner to the left. I turned right, trying to keep as much distance between me and whatever that dot represented. This hallway looked exactly like the last one, but there was something different. It wasn't a chill in the air, more like a heaviness. I slowed and flashed my lights all around, looking for anything that might be getting ready to attack me. With each step, the air grew still. The heaviness made it hard to breathe. I felt like I was being pulled down into the floor. Looking down, I gasped. My feet were gone. I pulled on my leg with both hands, struggling against the force pulling me under. After much effort, my right foot reappeared out of the floor. I did the same on the other side, and my left foot reappeared. I quickly backed away before I could get sucked in again. The floor appeared no different, but this strange, paranormal quicksand made me turn and go back the other way, hopefully still with room to avoid the red dot. As I walked, the heaviness didn't go away. It was as though I had brought something back with me, weighing me down. I passed the hallway to the stairs on my way to the other side. The end of this hallway opened up into a large room. Looking around, I saw dents along the wall. The room was sparsely decorated. There were lit torches on the bare stone wall every 10 feet or so. In the far corner, something caught my eye. I stepped up to it, checking all around first, and found a full-length mirror. Staring into it, I saw why the sheriff had stopped me. I looked like a combination of a petty thief and a survivalist. Taking the opportunity, I straightened my hair in the mirror. As I stared into it, a face appeared behind me. I whipped around, but nobody was there. Puzzled, I scanned the room for the interloper when strong hands grabbed me and pulled me inside the mirror. I flailed my arms around, trying to grab my captor and regain my balance at the same time, but it was futile. I was falling backward, just like in my nightmares, and there was nothing I could do but fall. After what seemed like forever, I landed on my back on a hard floor, knocking the wind out of me. While I struggled for my breath to return, I looked around the room. It had stone walls, but the floor was ornate like the floor of the main hall. Red eyes glared back at me from the corner and slowly approached. As it came closer to my light, I recoiled. It looked like the biggest dog I had ever seen, only it had no fur. It was like someone had skinned it alive and then left it to terrorize unwitting visitors. Drool slid around sharp-looking fangs and dripped to the floor, leaving a trail leading right up to me. I was helpless. Try as I might, I couldn't catch my breath. My hand unzipped the bag and reached inside. It found a round canister that I was looking for and whipped it out, ready to attack, only to find that I had grabbed the wrong can. I was holding garlic powder instead of pepper spray. The demon dog looked from me to the can and then came after me. I had just enough time to screw the lid off and shove the can in its mouth. It chewed the can to pieces and looked at me with renewed rage. As it took a step toward me, something strange happened. It sneezed once, spraying powder everywhere, then stumbled back and began shaking its head uncontrollably. It stumbled around like it was drunk and then ran away, slamming into walls as it went. As I ran away, I glanced back to see it rolling on the floor, furiously pawing at the sides of its mouth. I took a moment to grab the pepper spray out of my bag and stick it in my pocket, then checked my phone to see if that was the red dot. Unfortunately, the red dot was still there, off in the corner to the left. I looked around trying to get my bearings when suddenly the wind picked up. Wind in a basement wasn't something I was used to, unless someone had just turned on a massive fan. It just happened to be coming from the direction I wanted to go. Steeling myself as my strength returned, I found the wind to be a worthy adversary. It pushed back just as hard as I did, and it was hard to gain much ground. I fought one step at a time to reach my goal. Unable to see where the wind was coming from, I tried to find any obstacles I could hide behind to protect me from the wind, but it wasn't happening. As suddenly as the wind had started, it ended, leaving me leaning forward with nothing to fight against. I did a face plant on the floor, barely remaining conscious. I stepped out into a massive room with a ceiling so high I couldn't see it. Everything looked like it had been burned to a crisp. There was nothing on the walls, only piles of detritus on the floors. I approached one of the piles, and as I stared at it, I realized it was staring back. A burned human skull sat atop a pile of bones. Quickly backing away, I ran into another pile. My eyes grew wide as I tried to get away from both of them. Standing in the middle of the room, I counted 12 piles in total, 12 sets of charred human bones. My eyes darted around, trying to find what could have done this, when the biggest pile rose out of the floor, leaving the other piles falling from above and raining bones down on me. I dove near the wall and huddled, covering my head to protect myself from the falling skeletal remains. The rumble of the floor was deafening. I covered my ears and tried to see what was causing all the noise. Finally, the dust cleared, revealing a massive, honest-to-God, living, breathing dragon. I was stuck somewhere between awe and terror when it turned its huge, scaly head and looked right at me. All fell away and only terror was left. I pulled out my can of pepper spray and held it in my shaking hand. The dragon narrowed its eyes at me, making me shake all over and nearly lose my bladder control. It drew close to me and sniffed, first at me and then at my pack. Digging into it, keeping a close eye on the dragon so I didn't get distracted and become a snack, I wondered what it would find so interesting when I stumbled across the hot sauce. Pulling out a bottle, I unscrewed the lid and tossed it to the creature. It opened its massive, fang-filled mouth and caught the bottle. I crossed my fingers and started scooting along the wall away from the beast as it focused on whether it liked the flavor or not. It wasn't long until a massive claw slammed down in front of me, blocking my path. Closing my eyes, I prayed for a quick death, but after a minute, nothing had happened. I opened one eye and peeked at the dragon. Its mouth was open, like it was frozen in place. On a hunch, I opened another bottle and threw it in. It closed its mouth, and I swear it made a yum sound. The mouth opened again. Creeping just a bit closer, I tossed in another bottle, glancing at the two remaining and wondering what would happen when the treats were gone. I had a sinking suspicion I knew. With the next bottle, I held it up but didn't throw it immediately into the dragon's mouth. Instead, I threw it across the room as far as I could. The effect was immediate. It swung around and chased after it, nearly hitting me with its tail in its haste. I took advantage of the situation and ran behind it, hoping that would be the last place it looked. It wasn't long until it had found and devoured the bottle, and then turned back to where I had been. I stayed behind it, turning as it turned, playing a deadly game of hide and seek. The roar it bellowed terrified me, but I knew I had to keep my wits about me. I had a chance here, and I didn't want to blow it. The dragon stomped around where I had been, sniffing and slowly turning. I knew it had caught my scent. There was one card left to play. I stood in the middle of the room, allowing it to find me, and held up the last bottle. It lowered its head, and I swear it wagged its tail. While looking around, I spotted a door on the far end of the room. I threw the bottle in the opposite direction and waited a split second for it to chase the bottle before I sprinted toward the door. I was nearly there when I heard flapping. The giant feet landed in front of me, kicking up a cloud of dust that flooded my lungs and brought me to my knees in a coughing fit. As the cloud cleared, I saw two eyes staring at me, blocking my escape. I waited for death, knowing the beast knew I had tricked it. It took a step toward me, its breath nearly knocking me over. A low growl vibrated the air, and I knew I was dead. It opened its mouth. I waited and waited. I wanted more snacks, but I didn't have any. Vainly, I searched through my bag for anything, but there was nothing. In desperation, I patted my pockets. The pepper spray? I threw it as far away from the door as I could and waited for the dragon to chase it. To my surprise, it looked at me with a confused and almost sad expression, but then it turned and chased after the can. Ripping the door open, I turned and slammed it shut, and then slid against it down to the floor, closing my eyes. I sat and took a breather. Whatever came next, I wanted to be as ready as I could be. I knew the dragon room hadn't been as bad as it could have been, but I also knew once it discovered there were no more treats, I was next on the menu. Opening my eyes and looking around the room, there was an eerie, putrid glow coming from two torches standing side by side, illuminating the mist that clung to the floor. The mist wasn't cool and refreshing. It felt hot, like it had come from the bowels of the underworld. I rested for a moment, then made sure I had my pack strapped on and started toward the torches. As I arrived, a flame sprang to life on another set of torches in front of me. As I was led further into the room, my eyes darted left and right, waiting for a sneak attack. This continued until I stood in front of a raised dais with a throne on it. Sitting on the throne was a nightmare. It was the most hideous creature I had ever seen. It looked like a demon from a horror movie times 10. Horns covered every inch of its red skin. The thing was huge, easily dwarfing the massive throne. Its piercing eyes drilled into my soul, making me tremble as soon as I saw it. I hesitated, wondering if I wanted to approach, or if the choice had already been made once it saw me. My eyes shot to the sides of the room, searching for the escape door, but all I saw was a stairway. "Come forward," it said in a deep voice that sounded like 8,000 at once. It wasn't a request, it was a command. I took a single, hesitant step. "You've done well to come this far, but your challenge in this room is one of choice. Before you there's a stairway. One side leads up and the other down. You must choose. One will lead you back to the main hall, and the other will lead you to continue trials and torment. The choice is yours." 1,000 questions ran through my mind, but looking up into that terrifying nightmare face, they all died on my lips. I stepped over in front of the stairs as the creature watched me with a bemused look on its face. The stairs showed no indication of which choice to make. There were no symbols, no puzzle to figure out, no key to unlock, only a stark, blazing choice. Conventional wisdom would say up would be the side to pick. However, nothing in this place was conventional. Moments passed like falling rain. Every thought of choices made paraded through my mind. The repercussions of the choice were great. I was tired and had enough of this place for the night. I wasn't sure I would survive going deeper into the bowels of this ordeal. Suddenly, I was reminded of the words the sheriff had told me earlier this evening. "Whenever you get stuck, remember up is down." Could it really be that simple? Could this be the thing he was talking about? Maybe he meant something else, and this was just a coincidence. The choice was immensely important. I knew I couldn't survive much longer down here. I decided to trust the only piece of information I had. Stepping over to the downward stair, I looked into the depths. The beast on the throne scoffed. "Are you sure?" "No," I said, looking from it to the steps. I proceeded down into the darkness, thankful I brought more flashlights with me. Turning one on and looking around, there was nothing special about the stairs. They were made of stone, along with the walls and ceiling. They seemed to go on forever, with no break, no landing, only constant darkness. Several times I paused and looked back up the stairs, tempted to go back, but in the end I continued with my choice. After what seemed like forever, I came to the bottom of the stairs. There was no door, nothing except the floor and a mirror. I approached it and reached forward, only to have an arm reach out and grab me, yanking me in. Before I knew it, I was falling. The floor hit me hard, knocking the wind out of me. My backpack came next, landing on my head and making me regret how many supplies I had brought along. As I lay there, seeing stars and trying to breathe, a face appeared inches from my nose. "I trust you found your second night as interesting as your first," the smiling curator said. There were several answers I wanted to give him, but in the end, it was most fortunate that I couldn't breathe at the moment. Once recovered, I stood and checked the time. Somehow it was 9 in the morning. Whether my 2 trips through the looking glass had warped time, or my pack landing on my head had knocked me out, the curator watched me with a sly grin, seeming to drink in my confusion with great amusement. "Your pay is already sitting on the desk. Will I be seeing you later this evening for another night?" I walked over and picked up the stack of cash, ignoring the paper with the words, "I'd rather be lucky than good," on it. Sure enough, it was twice the amount as last night. "Will all the shifts pay the same?" I asked. He nodded. "When would my days off be?" He cocked his head to the side as if trying to understand the question. "To be determined," he said, and then disappeared. I walked toward the door, wondering if I would ever get used to his disappearing act. Then I thought about what he said. If my days off are to be determined, does that mean I won't get any? Or maybe I won't get any until the museum gets the best of me and I stay there forever as a ghost. Opening the door and walking out into the bright morning light, I wondered when that would be.